Welcome to the Music Nut Program. I'm John. Thank you so much for joining me today. And welcome to the latest edition of the Album War. The premise of this series is to talk about two or more bands, regardless of era, regardless of genre, who released an album with the same title. I will talk about these albums and then I will give my preference of which one I like more than the other. My first two had three albums apiece. This one's only going to have two, though. So, our first contestant in the album war is a band that needs no introduction the world over. They are considered by many to be the best band of our generations. I was born a little bit later, but my parents had their records. And I heard their music a lot on the radio before I realized who they were because many of their songs had these melodies that would stick in your brain from the first listen. Certainly one of the most eclectic, one of the most influential bands of all time. I'm talking about the Beatles with their 12th album, Let It Be, released on May 8th, 1970 on Apple Records. This was produced by George Martin, although he was uncredited. Later on, they added Phil Spector, who produced a few tracks on this album, added orchestral and string arrangements. Glenn Johns was the engineer. Alan Parsons was the assistant engineer on this album. Our other contestant today is one of the best rock bands there ever was, in my opinion, but I discovered them a little bit later because at the time I was a heavy metal kid when this came out. Released on October 2nd, 1984 on Twin Tone Records. You could call them indie rock, you could call them post-punk, you could call them alternative rock. I call them great. The Replacements with their third LP, Let It Be. This album was produced by Steve Felstad, Peter Jesperson, and Paul Westerberg, who is their main singer and songwriter. So let's talk about these albums. This was the last album released by the Beatles, but it wasn't the last recorded one. That one was Abbey Road. This is the Beatles trying to get back to their roots. They did it a little bit on the White Album, just a little bit on the White Album, just a little bit on Abbey Road. But here you could tell they're trying to get back to being a great rock and roll band like they were even before they had a record deal with Capitol Records. We do have songs that do have those elegant orchestral arrangements like you heard on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Magical Mystery Tour, for example. First track here is Two of Us, which is an acoustic song. George is, let me just introduce the Beatles to you. John Lennon, lead vocals, rhythm guitar, Paul McCartney on lead vocals, bass guitar. He also played piano. And he also played guitar on several of their songs. George Harrison was their lead guitarist. He would sing lead vocals on a few tracks. He was getting about one or two tracks an album. And of course, we had Ringo Starr on drums and percussion. Usually would get a lead vocal on most of the albums. He didn't get one on this one though. Anyway, getting back to Two of Us, which is a cool opener where you hear John and Paul's voices blending superbly. Their their harmonies were in their career among the best you'll ever hear. And it's great to hear Paul and John sing together on this one. This is a cool tune, great bridge on it, very memorable. You got John whistling at the end. This wasn't a single, but very strong opener. We do have three singles on here that all hit number one, and I will get into them shortly. Dig a Pony's very loose, kind of bluesy. This was one of the three tracks that was recorded when they went up to the top of the Capitol Records building and did an impromptu concert. This is them getting back to their roots, very ragged, very loose, not so perfect like a lot of those early albums were. This is a really cool tune. Across the Universe, this is John Lennon's song. This was originally just going to be an acoustic track, but it had a new dimension when you brought in Phil Spector's orchestration and accompaniments. And it made it a stronger track, in my opinion. Very memorable track, very strong chorus on this. I Me Mine, this is a George Harrison song. This is cool. This also has the orchestral arrangements from Phil Spector. And it's a decent deep track. Not one of my favorite songs by George Harrison, but it's cool. Dig It is very short, impromptu jam here with John leading the way on the vocals. This is cool. It's kind of short. Let It Be, first of three number one hits on this album. Definitely one of their finest songs, one of their most enduring, very memorable lyric on this. The organs brought in by Billy Preston really bring this song up a notch as well. Very memorable song. Great lyrical guitar solo from George Harrison on this also. Then we got Maggie May, which is just a traditional folk song rearranged by the Beatles themselves. This is kind of short. No, it would fit better on a soundtrack, and originally Let It Be was going to be a soundtrack. But later on they just released it as a proper album. I've got a feeling we're going back to that loose, old rock and roll style feel here. This is really cool. As is One After 909, it's more of a blues shuffle. But, kind of like Carl Perkins was doing in the late 50s and early 60s. This, again, is back to their roots. The Long and Winding Road, probably the track where the orchestral arrangements add the most to it. This is another number one single, and the orchestral arrangements really, really work on this. This might be my one of my favorite Phil Spector arrangements, certainly. Very strong track, and one of their more memorable ones from their later years as well. For You Blues, a George Harrison song. This song's okay. It was never one that really grabbed me much. It's decent. And Get Back, this has got more of a rollicking feel. Very memorable. Again, Billy Preston adds a lot to this song as well with the piano rolls on it. Very memorable lyric on it. Very cool way to end the album. This here is the 2 CD version. It came out in 2021, and this has the second disc has the outtake highlights on it, which are really cool. So this is the Beatles, Let It Be. And when this came out, this was actually very critically maligned after they had so many albums in a row where the critics loved them to death. This was maligned because of its looseness. The songs overall didn't have the craftsmanship, but there's still a lot to love on it. And there are a few songs on here which are clearly Beatles classics. Now we get to replacements. Now, this is the replacements really coming into their own, particularly Paul Westerberg as a songwriter. Before this band was more hardcore punk. By here, they really found their sound. To me, this is the first of three great albums right in a row. Tim came in 1985. To me, that's their finest. Pleased to Meet Me came in 1987, I believe. Let It Be is very good. Very strong. Replacements were Paul Westerberg on vocals, rhythm guitar. He's also playing mandolin on here. He's playing 12-string electric guitar. He's playing piano on a song on here as well. We got Bob Stinson on lead guitar, Tommy Stinson on bass. We have Chris Mars on drums. Also appearing on here is Peter Buck from REM, who does the lead solo on the track I Will Dare, and Chan Poling, who is playing piano on 16 Blue. Now, first song was I Will Dare. That was the first single. This is sound of a new replacements here. It's the jangly guitars do remind you a little bit of REM, but it's definitely them coming into their own. It's very, very catchy, both lyrically and musically. It's got a great chorus on it. Peter's solo on here is very, very strong. Cool track. Favorite thing is more driving and rocking. Very strong. A lot of the songs on here is still kind of short. We got a 33.5 minute album, over 11 tracks. Favorite thing is very catchy and very strong. We're coming out. We're going back to our old hardcore punk beginnings here with the replacements for about the first minute, minute 15, and then it ends abruptly, and then it comes back slowly with the slow burn. We're getting into a shuffle, and then we get heavy again, and it just ends in 2 minutes and 18 seconds. Tommy gets his tonsils out. This is more punk, but it's more melodic as well. It's very catchy. Not even 2 minute song. Lyrics are very humorous, very cool. Androgynous. Now we got a piano led song about cross dressing. Very memorable lyric. Might not have been something you can sing. I mean, wouldn't have been passe in 1984. You listen to this now. This is a great song. It's just very well crafted and written. Wonderful track. Next, we got a cover of Kiss's Black Diamond. That, of course, was on the first album, written by Paul Stanley. Very loose, fiery punk version of this, a lot shorter than Kiss's original track. It's a very good version of this. It's not going to touch the original. The original's a classic. It's one of my 3 or 4 favorite Kiss songs, and I've loved Kiss since '84, but it's still killer. I mean, they bring a lot of gusto to this song, done very faithfully. Excellent. Unsatisfied. Very cool, melodic, mid-tempo track on here. Wonderful vocal performance from Paul Westerberg. Great bridge on this as well. Again, like I was saying, Paul was really finding himself. He's finding his place as a songwriter. That's proof positive on this track. Senior video. This is very rocking and spirited. The replacements weren't in the videos. This is this was released at a time when MTV was where you got your music. It was where I was getting my music in 1984. And this is like a shot at videos at the time. They were more into recording the album, go see the band live. They weren't about image or the replacements at a time when image was so important. Just watch the video for Bastards of Young from their next album. You'll see how from next album Tim, and you'll see how seriously they take videos. Gary's Got a Boner, which was a song I wasn't into back in the day. I listen to it now. It's fun. It's a fun rocker. It's cool. 16 Blue, we're getting more almost like what we call Americana now. Very mid-tempo, acoustic led. The electric guitars brought in by Bob Stinson really complement Paul's acoustic guitars on here. Very whimsical, excellent track. Great chorus on it, excellent. Answering Machine, we end this more on a rockin' end. It's very, very melodic, very catchy. Great sing-along chorus on it. Wonderful end to a great album by The Replacements from 1984, Let It Be. So, who wins the album war? Let's put them up here. All right. I love both of these bands. I like this album a lot. over time, this has gained a lot of stature. I would give this probably an 8, 8.5. I give a lot of their albums a 10, the Beatles. Replacements wins, though. This is a 9.5. This is a kick ass album. This album has not aged at all. This still sounds so fresh, very well recorded, very well played. It has that spirit of punk, but they were becoming great songwriters and they were getting very, very tight as a band. This is a nice starting point for the replacements. I would go with Tim, but Let It Be is so close. They're both great. A lot of people, a lot of fans consider this their magnum opus, their best album. It's close. So, what do you think of these bands? And what do you think of these albums? Would you pick the Beatles over replacements, or would you agree with me that the replacements made a superior album called Let It Be? Please let me know in the comments. Chris Whitley Wednesday will be continuing this Wednesday, which is January 29, 2025. I will be discussing his third album, Terra Incognita. I do have another album war coming up in the next week. I actually have several album war episodes coming up in the next few months. Thank you all who have been giving me ideas to do these. I will tell you right now, this one's for you, Eric Robertson, and for you, Jake, not from State Farm. You both gave me ideas on this album war I'm going to do. That one's going to be a fatal four-way, and you two gave me three albums that I had to go out and buy, and I got to ingest before I do that one. Just let y'all know about that coming up in the near future. So, until I see you again, do what you love, and I'll talk to you soon.